Through the use of nukes, pollution, and industrialization, humans have changed our planet. This new era of the planet is called the Anthropocene. Scientists debate over when the Anthropocene can be said to have started, but I don't think it really matters because we as humans can sense that the Anthropocene has started. We can see the impact of climate change in our real world and on the news. We need art that reflects our contemporary fears and shows us that we can recover what has been lost and fix what has been broken. Princess Mononoke, directed by Hayao Miyazaki in 1997, FernGully, directed by Bill Croyer in 1992, and WALL-E, directed by Andrew Stanton in 2002, are three examples that I deem Anthropocene films. Anthropocene films feature apocalyptic destruction to nature that has either already happened and must be lived with, or the characters can prevent from happening. These films engage with our empathy, making us feel for nature. They do this through representing nature as cute fairies or other cute creatures, or by showing us our interconnectivity with nature and the joy that it gives us. They have morals and lessons about harmony and environmental preservation, although, as I'm going to get into, they don't always communicate these effectively. As much as I love these movies, I've noticed that Anthropocene films tend to perpetrate the myth that two strong-willed, compassionate heroes can just change everyone's viewpoint and actions. The level of nuance and how guilty these films attempt to make their viewers varies a lot between them, correlating strongly to how much it was supposed to be made for kids. The main conflict in all three films involves catastrophic harm to nature and the need to convince the masses to change their way of life. All three films have positive ideas about how to treat the environment and say a great deal about our collective fears about the loss and change of our ecosystems that we depend on and love, but their endings are an extreme simplification of the realities of the organization of human societies and the ability of industry to live alongside nature. These films contain a soothing quality, and none of them fully shame humans for their creation of the context of the Anthropocene. They do this through vague references to corporate greed, alongside a non-human problem that can be the real crisis to fight. The film that most undercuts its own point this way is FernGully. The movie seems determined to not make human beings feel that bad about what they've done to nature. In the film, fairies live happily in FernGully because they have trapped the evil Tim Curry demon Hexus in a tree. They believe that all humans were killed off by Hexus, but PTSD-riddled Robin Williams' Bat shows up and tells them in an utterly bizarre rap number that humans are still alive and in fact villains who experiment on animals. A deforestation crew shows up and begins to threaten the fairies and animal habitats. Krista, our protagonist, shrinks a human crew member named Zach, and he proceeds to learn about fairy life, the fact that trees feel pain, all while flirting with Krista. The deforestation is an issue on its own, but of course the true conflict of the story is that the deforestation has unleashed Hexus, the Tim Curry demon. And now he's going to, well, I guess just keep deforesting? Hexus appears to have no real power because all he does is just hang out and motivate the humans to cut down more trees. Our good guys win by defeating Hexus, not industry, which, let's face it, is their real problem. A scene I find telling is one in which Krista realizes that humans did it. Humans did it all. She realizes, along with the rest of the fairies, that Zach is not benevolent and the humans have been causing the chaos around them. Zach is confronted and he tells the truth, that the humans are destroying the forest and he is helping them do it. But right after this admission, Magi sweeps in and tells them that Hexus has been set loose, revealing the true conflict of the story, fighting Hexus. A magical threat is brought in the same moment that industry is being questioned and a human is being made to apologize and feel guilty. This undercuts human guilt and stops the questioning of industry from going further. I feel like FernGully was afraid of ruffling feathers and didn't want a film that was too radical. But not all Anthropocene films have the need for this sanitization. Hayao Miyazaki is one filmmaker who really does not fear the blowback from his films and clearly creates what he wants to create when he wants to create it. In Princess Mononoke, the humans are made much more obviously at fault. The majority of the human characters in the film work in the ironworks, and the conflict between them and the gods is already occurring when the protagonist Ashitaka arrives. The film portrays the ironworks and its girl boss leader, Lady Eboshi, in a very nuanced way. It is both destroying nature and saving the lives of these women who Lady Eboshi has recruited to work here. These are not bad people, they are simply complicit people. Once again, the harm the industry is doing to nature is not quite dealt with, as our heroes have to deal with the larger problem of Lady Eboshi shooting the deer god and causing death to spread across the world. Once again, the magical apocalypse is set loose and not driven by humans. Unlike in FernGully, however, Miyazaki does take time to criticize industry. Lady Eboshi also chooses to kill the deer god because he is standing in the way of her enterprise. So human greed and the desire for industry to continue to create more money for the person at the top is highlighted as the cause of the magical apocalypse. It would be truer to the realities of the Anthropocene if the ironworks slowly destroyed nature on its own, but of course that would make for a much less exciting movie. I honestly think that Miyazaki strikes a very good balance between creating a problem that can happen and be dealt with within the span of a movie, while still commenting on the longer-term, more realistic problems. WALL-E, perhaps the film I'm most indebted to for my own environmentalism, has a very different narrative arc from FernGully and Princess Mononoke. It begins in the post-apocalypse and asks, where do we go from here? The film follows robots WALL-E and Eve in their efforts to save a plant. All the humans live on a spaceship addicted to screens after Earth became too polluted to live on, but if they save this plant, the humans will return to Earth and try to fix it. Perhaps the best line in Mononoke is after the climax, when one of the characters says, I didn't know it was the dear God that made the flowers grow. Both WALL-E and Mononoke ask the viewer to reflect on humanity's need and connection to nature. Anthropocene films encourage you to witness the beauty of nature by showing characters discovering and witnessing the beauty of nature for themselves. For example, in WALL-E, when one of the characters is drawn away from her screen to see how beautiful the night sky is. But what WALL-E does that the other ones do not do is show our planet in a state of decay as well. The opening scene is highly impactful. The shots of garbage intentionally mimic the look of mountains until we get closer. The joyful song playing in the background with the lyrics, "There's lots of world out there," creates a haunting feeling. This scene makes us consider if we really want to be living in the Anthropocene. The subversive potential of these narratives is taking a system of exploitation and dependence on resources to the logical extreme. They present a critique of the world as it is and serve as a warning about what may come. Sonia Zakula and Oris Matic, which I'm sure I'm not saying correctly, define the Anthropocene film this way. Their analysis of Anthropocene films is incredibly important to my own understanding, and we will be referencing them more later. However, I do just want to pause here and talk about why all these films are animated. Visuals play an incredibly important role in the development of the environmental movement. In the United States, verbal descriptions and visual representations of the natural environment during the 19th and 20th centuries directly led to early efforts in conservation and preservation, writes Pamela Gosson. Gosson highlights throughout her paper that Miyazaki is particularly skilled at creating visuals that make the viewer feel a sense of connection to and humbleness before nature. Anthropocene films are very well suited to the medium of animation. With animation, filmmakers can show greater environmental destruction without having to actually do harm to nature, or implement CGI natural destruction into a real world, which might just feel lifeless. None of the three films I'm talking about here feel lifeless. Instead, they are packed with incredibly vivid imagery. Animation allows filmmakers to create a whole world which is deeply more immersive and creates that feeling of connectedness that Gosson was talking about. Animation is also used because it is more digestible for the viewer to see horrible things happening in their world when the world is animated. So animation both allows filmmakers to create lifelike landscapes and cushion the blow of watching them be destroyed. WALL-E does something pretty unique where it blends animation and real life. Real actors are used for the humans of the past, while the humans of the present in WALL-E's world are animated. There are many ways to interpret this choice, but my interpretation is that it is demonstrating alienation. Like I said before, Anthropocene films are about fears of change. But nature is not the only thing that has changed. We as humans have changed too. We have become alienated from ourselves and others through technology. Along with showing this alienation, WALL-E shows that connection is still possible. The film is very focused on those moments of connection, giving us hope. In their paper, The Motif of Lost Paradise in Blockbuster Films Set in Post-Apocalypse, authors Sonia Zakulas and Oris Matic draw connections between the Anthropocene film and biblical myth. While we are racing towards ecological collapse on a planet plagued with extreme weather events, wars, and a pandemic, mythical stories can ease anxieties, provide escapism, but also give hope, instruct, and provide meaning. FernGully, WALL-E, and Princess Mononoke all feature boy-girl duos that are reminiscent of Adam and Eve. This analogy is quite overt in WALL-E, where WALL-E's female-coded robot companion is literally named Eve. Both FernGully and WALL-E have scenes where the characters seem to discover fire, and FernGully begins with a story painted on a cave wall. These references to the beginning of civilization and humanity suggest that these new Adams and Eves will re-begin society with a new, better direction. Zakula and Matic explain that these new Lost Paradise narratives depict a world that was lost, not so much through divine destruction, but through human destructive action. The issue with this is that Anthropocene films always entail a struggle to regain what was lost, with little to no critical reflection on why it was lost in the first place. The main problem I find with the representation of solutions in Anthropocene films is that they focus a great deal on the individual, the Adam and Eve figures. FernGully is by far the most egregious, with the problems of deforestation just being resolved by Zach putting his arms around his logging buddies and saying, "Guys, things have to change." Thanks, I really believe that this random 20-something is going to convince everybody in the world to stop deforesting. WALL-E is presented as a singular hero, the only moving thing in the landscape at the beginning of this movie. He changes everything because of his pureness of heart while not even intentionally fighting the system. But no one can accidentally fix the problems of the Anthropocene in real life. The movie, as much as it begins with the damning imagery of destruction and the industrial exploitation of the earth, doesn't continue to question how this happened. The conflict becomes the mutiny of one evil robot, and we spend the rest of the movie rooting for the good robots against the evil one. Princess Mononoke has a similar problem with Ashitaka being a true pure of heart hero, but I think it does a much better job than the other two. As Michelle J. Smith and Elizabeth Parsons write, Princess Mononoke problematically disrupts the established order, while FernGully preserves conservative boundaries. You may be wondering why I've referred so much to Miyazaki personally and not the directors of the other projects I'm looking at. This is because Miyazaki is an auteur director, a director who writes and directs and creates the entire film from the beginning. If you watch enough of his movies, his personal philosophy on the Anthropocene becomes very clear. Pamela Gosson makes it clear that Miyazaki is resistant to having overt messages in his films. This is true, but I also agree with Gwendolyn Morgan that Christian and Shinto tenets shine through. I've discussed the Christian influences on these movies, so I think it's important to touch on the Shinto influences as well. Morgan writes that in traditional Japanese culture, spiritual and physical pollution are closely related. Miyazaki ardently believes that when humans moved from hunting and gathering to living in an agrarian society, they became focused on manipulating their environment for their own personal desires. Miyazaki wanted to make films about that shift. Pamela Gosson writes that his visuals remind viewers of the inescapable convergence of human events and actions. The implication of humans and their deep ties to the natural world means that the environmental message is not reducible to, we should save the rainforest because cute fairies live there, which Smith and Parson criticize as the messaging directed at children in FernGully. This messaging, as they explain, leads to the diminishment of the environmental lessons in the film as fairies diminish in significance for the child audience. Because of Miyazaki's philosophy about connection to nature, his films communicate that with mutual dependence there is mutual destruction. But even Miyazaki can't resist the trope of having a singular hero and their opposite gender companion change everything for everyone. This narrative trope is part of the soothing quality of these films. They tell us, don't worry, someday someone will show up that'll just fix things for us too in this world. But this just isn't true in the real world. We know that the Anthropocene was caused by our collective action, and only collective action can really change the course that we are on. And also, collective action is quite slow. It takes many years and many people to make any real difference on any social issue. We do not as humans have a tendency to just listen to the pure of heart heroes. This is the true fantasy that these films create. The messaging of all of these films is easily lost on both children and adults because of something they all do: decenter human responsibility. Narratives about survivors trying to regain a lost paradise by killing each other or fighting machines serve to blur the fact that the proverbial paradise was not so great to begin with. I am, despite all this criticism, a big fan of Anthropocene films, and these three films in particular have had an impact on me. I think it's worth considering, though, where the narrative tropes that they follow come from and how they use narrative structure. I don't know whether an Anthropocene film that centers human responsibility would work, or if it would just be an irredeemably miserable watch. I think a film about the collective rather than heroes, or a film where the heroes don't succeed in convincing the collective, would not be very watchable. The closest thing we have to an Anthropocene film that is truly realistic and therefore miserable is Don't Look Up. And the problem in this film is not even human caused, it's just human neglect that leads them to never deal with it. Ultimately, a pessimistic film may not even be very useful, and I'd rather be watching Princess Mononoke anyway. I think the point of these films is that they give us hope in these complicated times. They show us a fantasy of connection and community triumphing, and nature being saved. We need these narratives to soothe our anxieties, and to encourage us to continue to try and form community and connection, and do the work that needs to be done to push the Anthropocene in the right direction. Even if this is just saying, guys, things need to change, every now and again.